we need Julian Assange. And one thing I want to say to you today is, it is not only that he is the victim of torture, it is not only that his life is at stake, it is not only we want to save him from a dreadful injustice, we also want to save him because the world needs Julian Assange as a symbol and fighter for liberty.
That was Craig Murray at the very top. That was footage of Craig at the Ecuadorian embassy a few years back and under surveillance by a company called UC Global. And that is the theme of this show. We are going to talk about this evil outfit that worked for Sheldon Adelson in Las Vegas, who was working for Mike Pompeo to spy on Julian Assange. So that's why we had that at the beginning. We got a very big show today. We have Stefania Maurizi, who was the focus of the Morales investigation and surveillance, and the guy who wrote today's article in the Grayzone. The Grayzone, that's it, the Grayzone, .com or .org. Max Blumenthal wrote this great piece today, and we're going to interview him first. And it's an explosive, bombshell type of article that he wrote. A lot of new revelations. He really digs in deep into it and makes a lot of revelations like a good investigative journalist does. My name is Randy Credico. This is Randy Credico Live on the Fly. This is Assange Countdown to Freedom. I've done so many of these. This is episode 21. Kelly Lane is engineering in North Carolina, and Jimmy Sunderland in California. So we are just going to get right into it, folks. We are a little bit of, we got Max the Knife, but we're going to play a little Louis Armstrong and Mac the Knife and come right back on the other side and talk about this explosive article today in the Grayzone by Max Blumenthal. Be right back.
Oh, the shark has pretty teeth, dear, and he shows them pretty white. Just a jackknife as Mac Heat, dear, and he keeps it out of sight. When the shark bites with his teeth, dear, scarlet billows start to spread. Fancy gloves though wears Mac Heat, dear, so there's not a trace of red. Oh, on the sidewalk Sunday morning lies a body oozing life. Someone sneaking around the corner. Is that someone? Mac the Knife, yes, from a tugboat.
Okay, that was Satchmo, Louis Armstrong, Mac the Knife, Max the Knife. And we actually have the real Max the Knife on the show at this point, and that's the great investigative journalist who has about 1 million books out there and is like the head guy at the Grayzone project, Grayzone News. And that's my good friend making this. It's like the trifecta now. Third time on Live on the Fly, Assange Countdown to Freedom this year. Good to see you, Max.
Good to see you.
This is
nice bookshelf.
Huh? You like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Just don't comment on the tie. But it's great. Max, you're not wearing your mask. Do you ever wear a mask?
Yeah, actually, I was lucky enough to find a mask in my basement that I was using last year on a construction project. That's a N95 mask. So I have the most coveted mask, but I don't wear it when I'm walking down the street. I see people wearing their mask walking down the street, and it just feels weird, especially in DC where there just aren't that many people on the street. It seems like they just like wearing masks.
Yeah. Well, I definitely needed a mask back in January when I took the megabus back from the
You need like a full biohazard suit on the megabus.
the megabus. That's the last time I leave late from DC. But Max, I got to tell you something. This piece, as I was talking about in the opening, that is out today at Grayzone News. Grayzone News, Grayzone project. Is it?
Grayzone.com.
Just Grayzone.com.
Grayzone.com.
Grayzone.com. This is like, you know, I've been reading, as I said before, about UC Global. I even got a small part in it, but this is like all new shit to me. Excuse my language, and I won't do that again. But a lot of this stuff is like new to me. This is like a tome, man. It's 5,200 words. What drove you into writing about UC Global, and how did you find all of these new nuggets?
Well, there is an ongoing investigation into illegal activity by this Spanish security contractor, UC Global, run by former Spanish Special Forces officer David Morales, by a Spanish court. And a Spanish judge authorized a secret, basically like a secret plan to arrest Morales, obtain all of his phones, de-encrypt the data in his phones, obtain company emails, after company employees and a former business partner of Morales came forward to Julian Assange's legal team and basically divulged that they were spying on Assange, his lawyers, his American friends, including you, journalists, and even Ecuadorian diplomats at the Ecuadorian embassy in London. They were conducting illegal activity, and it appears pretty clear that they were doing it on behalf of Mike Pompeo's CIA. And this has, been reported in bits and pieces by El País, the Spanish Daily, the New York Times did a piece on it. But what I have that's new here, in addition to a lot of new detail about the spying operation and the gross misconduct that was carried out by what appears to have been a CIA contractor, UC Global, basically lying to their Ecuadorian clients, lying to the Ecuadorian government, concealing the spying operation from them, is I've identified the middlemen, the people who were kind of the front for this vast spying ring. And these are the directors of Sheldon Adelson's security team at Las Vegas Sands.
Wait a second. Tell us who Sheldon Adelson is.
Sheldon Adelson is one of the single most influential figures in Trump world. He is an ultra-Zionist billionaire, consistently on the top 10 list of Forbes' most wealthy Americans, who spent his vast fortune to help get Donald Trump elected after trying to unseat Barack Obama and stop the Iran deal. Adelson's motivated by two things. Number one, support for Israel, and specifically the Israel of Benjamin Netanyahu. And number two, expanding his global casino empire and resort empire, which extends from Las Vegas to Macau in Chinese territory in the People's Republic of China. And one of the things I did in this investigation is actually connect two times when Adelson's Las Vegas Sands appeared to have acted as a front for the CIA. First, I got documents that were reported on previously by papers like The Guardian these documents basically were a report produced by a private investigator that had been hired by the casino industry on the use of CIA operatives at the Macau Las Vegas Sands casino by U.S. intelligence to blackmail Chinese officials who are gambling at the casino in order to turn them into informants. Basically, we caught you spending all this money at the casino. We showed that you're corrupt. Now go into the Chinese government and inform for us. So that was in 2015 when that was revealed. And that same year, Adelson's Las Vegas Sands, or it was actually a year later, recruited David Morales, apparently on behalf of the CIA, to spy on Julian Assange. So Morales, at the time, in 2016, he had a contract to guard the children of the president of Ecuador, Rafael Correa, who was a leftist who had given asylum to Julian Assange. And because Morales' company, UC Global, this private small-time security contractor, was based in Spain, he rolled that contract into guarding Assange at the embassy in London because Correa needed someone who was EU-based who could just handle that. And so Morales realized, this is a guy who wanted to be the next Eric Prince. He wanted to have this global Blackwater army for hire that would give him connections at the highest level, connections in Washington. He realized he had.
Wait a second, Max. Yeah. Can I just ask you this?
Yeah.
Why did Correa pick him? Did he do?
He just picked him. It was kind of like picking someone out of a hat, but he was the only person that could easily come over with his team and provide security at the embassy in London, just because he was based in the EU, in the Schengen zone in Spain. So they just had this connection with a EU-based contractor, so they just gave it to him, not knowing that this guy was extremely devious. So Morales realizes, I'm guarding Julian Assange. He's a top target of US intelligence. Let me see what I can do with this. So he goes to a security fair in Las Vegas in July 2016, which I think was being hosted at the Las Vegas Sands Expo in Las Vegas.
Right. And
there, according to a witness, he is approached by the top bodyguard of Sheldon Adelson, named Zohar Lahav, who is an Israeli, former Israeli intelligence. Basically, Adelson surrounded himself with former Israeli intelligence officials as his bodyguard team.
Not from the Mossad necessarily, right?
What's that?
Not from the Mossad.
Some appear to have either been from the Mossad or the Shin Bet, which is Israel's general security service. And we can get more into that. But Lahav, who is basically Adelson's body man in charge of his executive protection team, approaches Morales at the security fair and recruits him for this spying operation targeting Julian Assange at the embassy in London. And the cover was that he had a contract to protect Adelson on his yacht and elsewhere, but it was just a fake cover. So it looks like Lahav was kind of acting as the middleman between the CIA and UC Global. And as I mentioned before, Las Vegas Sands had acted as a front for the CIA in the past, according to this investigation. So Adelson runs back to Jerez de la Frontera, which is the base of UC Global in southern Spain, and he starts bragging to his fellow employees, we're playing in the first division now, we're playing in the big leagues. I'm going to get all of these new contracts because I'm working with the Americans. And that was because he'd just been recruited by Adelson, but he's alluding to U.S. intelligence and the protected.
That's in court documents. That's in court documents that he said he's working with the Americans.
Yeah, and it's been reported in other publications. But the protected witnesses in the testimony that I've obtained and seen, they make it very clear, much more clear. They're much more explicit than has been previously reported, that Morales was working on behalf of American intelligence. I mean, the New York Times said it's unclear what role the Americans played in spying on Assange, but it's very clear here. So what winds up happening is in the middle of 2017, according to the witnesses, this is a former business partner of Morales and two former employees, the people who came forward and dimed him out, or basically came forward and blew the whistle on what appeared to be criminal activity by him.
Wait a second. How big was his staff?
Well, it's a small staff, and you know, they were playing in the minor leagues before this. But the only people who really mattered were this former business partner who he divulged everything to, and the employees, including people who appeared to have been at the embassy. But you know, they had a small security team at the embassy who were just following orders, and the orders came in starting in mid-2017 to not only place microphones inside the cameras. The cameras at the embassy were just standard CCTV cameras before that point. And they were recording, you know, who was coming in and out. They were trying to prevent intruders from coming in. Their goal was to protect Assange, who had asylum at the time, legal asylum, and to protect the embassy staff. What they did was they turned that whole system into a spying intrusion system, apparently on behalf of the CIA. And they were getting instructions in English, which is a dead giveaway here, to put microphones in to the cameras, to, you know, when Julian Assange started using white noise in the conference room where you met with him because he felt that he was being spied on, to slip a magnetic microphone on the fire extinguisher in the conference room so they could listen through the white noise, to get a microphone into the women's bathroom where Assange was meeting for very sensitive conversations with his lawyers. And then the most remarkable component of the spying operation that I obtained was a slideshow, a PowerPoint presentation written in perfect English, clearly not written by David Morales, who is a native Spanish speaker, who writes almost everything to his employees in Spanish, written in perfect English, explaining how his UC Global team can turn these cameras can create a separate feed on these cameras for the Americans, those he refers to as the American friends, with another feed and another entirely different login system for the Ecuadorian security services who they're supposed to be working for. So they're feeding video with sound and everything to the quote unquote American friends, apparently the CIA.
Yeah, well, wait a second, man. Now, Adelson's not getting this. And just before you continue there, what would be Adelson's motivation here? Was he like someone that wanted to get Assange? Obviously, somebody went to him.
Yeah, so I'm building, like, let me just build up to that. Man. So we have this perfect English slideshow. You have these instructions that were given to Morales on how to create this separate feed for the Americans so that the Ecuadorians and the Ecuadorian government, which is protecting Assange, doesn't know this spying operation is taking place. When David Morales received that PowerPoint presentation and then emailed it to his employees and his team at the London embassy, he was emailing from a static IP address at the Venetian Hotel, which is owned by Sheldon Adelson in Las Vegas. So he was getting these instructions from someone who was working in Las Vegas Sands in Adelson's security team. Now, who would that be? I can't confirm this, but the head of Sheldon Adelson's security team is named Brian Nagel, and he is someone who created the teams and the systems within U.S. government that would have been used against Julian Assange and WikiLeaks as soon as WikiLeaks came online in 2010. Brian Nagel, who's currently the head of Las Vegas Sands Security, was the former deputy director of the U.S. Secret Service. And a lot of people, they associate the Secret Service with, guys in dark suits, grim bodyguards with aviator glasses talking into their sleeves, surrounding the president. But the Secret Service is actually the top cybercrime investigating agency in the U.S., and they coordinate closely with the FBI and U.S. intelligence. And Nagel set up the LA cybercrime operations room with the FBI. He's been on stage with John Ashcroft when Ashcroft was Attorney General to introduce a new cybercrime fighting initiative. He set up a system that actually employed hacking to take down a cybercrime syndicate called shadowcrew.com. And his last act before leaving government in 2008 was helping the Department of Homeland Security set up its own cybercrime fighting initiative, in which the then DHS director, Michael Chertoff, described using tools that the hackers use to turn the tables on them. So Nagel is someone who actually knows how to do hacking. He would have known how to create this PowerPoint presentation that was used to spy on Assange. And so basically, Adelson has everyone he needs within his own financial and political empire to make this operation happen. And the final person that kind of squares the circle here, I mean, I could go on and on about people in Adelson's empire who are also in Trump world, but the most important figure is Mike Pompeo, who was the CIA director. And I believe, if you read this story, you'll get a pretty clear indication that Adelson played an influential role in making Mike Pompeo CIA director, in Pompeo's elevation to Secretary of State, where he's, enacting the maximum pressure campaign against Iran. But in Pompeo's first speech as CIA director, and I think this is one of the most overlooked moments in the history of the Trump administration, Pompeo launched into this resentful, paranoid diatribe against Assange, and he identified WikiLeaks as the agency's top target. He said, they're no longer going to be able to use our own free speech codes against us. We're going to call them out. And he outlined a series of countermeasures he would take against them, which really foreshadowed the campaign that was actually employed under the watch of UC Global through Las Vegas Sands, with the CIA apparently serving as the guiding hand here. But it appears pretty clear to me that someone like Brian Nagel could have been the perfect liaison to interface between the CIA, Las Vegas Sands, and UC Global, and he is the director of security for Sheldon Adelson's Sands.
Well, I don't understand why Sheldon Adelson himself would have any kind of motivation. I know he's a hawk on Israel, and he's anti-Palestinian and all of that. He's a real hawkish anti-Palestinian, but I don't understand why he would himself, with those sentiments, would necessitate spying on Julian Assange unless he was doing it for somebody else.
Well, it looks as though he was doing it to kind of help out the Trump administration. It also was helping them push back on Russiagate. But, there's a long history of billionaires serving as CIA cutouts, and it benefits them in so many ways. It helps them with favorable contracts. They get the U.S. government protecting them as they expand their empire. So I can't really speak to Adelson's motivation, but there are a lot of indications that he at least had a very close relationship with Mike Pompeo. And since Pompeo started an exploratory committee for a potential Senate campaign in Kansas, it's been reported that he's identified Sheldon Adelson as his top donor, as the real money man for his potential Senate run.
Everybody seems to go to him. I know that Newt Gingrich went to him. Ted Cruz went to Adelson, and they all become very hawkish when it comes to Israel and their situation there, the siege of Gaza. And Trump, of course, he totally reflects Adelson's vision of
completely.
It's totally moving the capital to Jerusalem and all of that.
This is Adelson's stated goal. This is why he plowed his money into the Trump campaign. And Adelson is also a top patron to Benjamin Netanyahu. So when you saw Trump and Netanyahu stand together and introduce the deal of the century, or the steal of the century, basically Sheldon Adelson was sitting right there in the front row.
I saw that with his wife, and they got some kind of award, right? Now, you also mentioned in this article that Adelson, his only regret was serving in the U.S. Army rather than
serving in the Israeli army.
Israeli army.
I mean, he's sort of, it's almost like he's a hologram being beamed from the imagination of some demented anti-Semite. He's like he's a literal Israel firster. But here you see him going to bat for the quote unquote American friends and helping them take down what Mike Pompeo identified as his top target.
WikiLeaks walks like a hostile intelligence service and talks like a hostile intelligence service. It has encouraged its followers to find jobs at the CIA in order to obtain intelligence. It's time to call out WikiLeaks for what it really is: a non-state hostile intelligence service, often abetted by state actors like Russia. In January of this year, our intelligence community determined that Russian military intelligence, the GRU, had used WikiLeaks to release data of U.S. victims that the GRU had obtained through cyber operations against the Democratic National Committee. And the report also found that Russia's primary propaganda outlet, RT, has actively collaborated with WikiLeaks.
And this is not a role that's unfamiliar for billionaires who want favorable treatment from the U.S. government. I mean, Adelson was fighting, I think, a money laundering investigation from the Department of Justice all the way up to 2010 because of his activities in Macau. So I can see any number of reasons why he would have participated in this. One of the interesting things I've learned, though, is that Zohar Lahav, one of the main middlemen here who helped recruit Morales, became a good friend of Morales, wrote recommendations for him to help him play in the first division, has been fired from Las Vegas Sands. And I just called Zohar Lahav. I obtained his phone number through company emails not company emails, through the cell phone data of David Morales, because he was constantly calling him in April 2017. And he was constantly calling this Las Vegas phone number.
All right.
So I called it. Zohar Lahav picks up, and I wanted to ask him, have you been fired? But he hung up on me.
I'm shocked. There's gambling going on here. Now, wait. All right. So we know about that guy. He and that guy Nagel, they seem like real shady characters. And so now we get back to the middle of June, and this operation is set up. Let's go from there.
Well, the middle of June, I mean, it really comes down to December 2017. And I'm sure Stefania Maurizi, formerly of La Repubblica, who's been on your show a lot, has done some of the best reporting on WikiLeaks.
She's on right after you.
Yeah, she's coming on after me. Well, I interviewed her for this story, and she told me that in December 2017, that's when she was really getting shaken down at the embassy. They were taking her phones out, taking her backpack, and photographing everything. It turns out that pretty much every visitor by December 2017 to the embassy was having their phone opened, SIM numbers were photographed. Everything was photographed that would have enabled the hacking of the phone. Pam Anderson, a friend of Julian Assange, had her Gmail password stolen by UC Global. All of this was taking place apparently under orders from the quote-unquote American friends. One of the interesting things I discovered here through review of company emails from UC Global was a target list outlined by David Morales. Obviously, these were U.S. targets. And one of them was Olabini, who was a friend of Julian Assange, who was arrested on the same day that Julian was arrested, April 11th. Olabini was arrested in Ecuador, where he was living, and he's been in prison ever since. Morales somewhat dubiously, maybe falsely, identified him as a hacker. I mean, he was just told he was a hacker. They were obsessed with Olabini. They were obsessed with Assange's legal team. They were obsessed with Glenn Greenwald, and I've obtained a photograph of Greenwald's passport, which was opened by UC Global, and they photographed a Russian visa on his passport, which is totally consistent with the whole Russiagate hysteria, the narrative of Russiagate, where they're trying to connect everyone from Julian on down to Glenn Greenwald to Russia. Glenn had actually just gone to a public media event in Moscow in 2018. It wasn't like some secret trip to Russia. He was on a panel with a strongly anti-Putin journalist. And when he came back, he was branded as a Kremlin spy by MSNBC's Malcolm Nance. So it's really disturbing that a apparent CIA contractor was also trying to make this connection against an American journalist. Julian's legal team was targeted. Baltasar Garzón, who is, his lead lawyer, was actually followed by UC Global spies to his home during a meeting with Rafael Correa in Madrid. I've also learned that, here's one of the most shocking things that I've learned. In December 2017, when the security just ramped up to the point that it became just oppressive for anyone to visit Julian Assange, it wasn't some coincidence. This had to do with surveillance and what the spies, apparent CIA contractors, were detecting, which is that Julian Assange and his lawyers were conceiving a plan for him to exit the embassy by, for instance, him being granted diplomatic immunity by an ally of Ecuador, and then under the Vienna Conventions, him being legally freed. And the US wanted to do anything it could to stop this plan from coming to fruition, and it nearly did. It got so close to coming to fruition that that the head of Ecuador's SENAIN, which is the Ecuadorian intelligence service, Romy Vallejo, visited the embassy in London on December 20th, 2017 to finalize the plan. It all relied on him just making the final preparations. And this was just 5 days before Assange was planning to leave the embassy. At this point, Morales ordered his team to actually target the head of Ecuador's intelligence services, to open his phone, to open the cameras, to steal private information inside his phones. So this was December 20th. Morales had all that information that night. On December 21st, the day after the meeting, U.S. prosecutors filed their secret charges against Julian Assange in a federal court in Alexandria, Virginia. So the secret indictment of Assange was a direct result of this plan for him to get diplomatic immunity. I've also learned, according to a source who was involved in the plan for him to exit the embassy, that the U.S. ambassador to Ecuador, Todd Chapman, warned Ecuadorian authorities not to execute the plan. He actually told them, I know about your plan. I know what you're doing. Do not do it, which clearly shows a U.S. intelligence role in the spying here. I've also learned through this source, that one of the Ecuadorian officials who was involved in the plan returned to Quito and took a government vehicle from the airport, which was promptly held up by masked gunmen who robbed him of his laptop, which contained details of the plan. And so that was that. The plan was foiled through this apparent spying and gross misconduct. And we could even deduce that a robbery was committed, that just crimes were committed to stop this plan. And then, April 11th, 2019, Julian is hauled out of the embassy into a police van. It was the first time in history, I think, that government allowed a foreign law enforcement agency to enter its sovereign territory to arrest one of its citizens. And so here we are.
I've never seen that. I know that the Bishop of Panama City allowed the U.S. troops to go in and nab Noriega, 30 years ago. But I've never seen something like this happen in an embassy. So this really gets ramped up in December, as you said. I was there. I know Rohrabacher was there. The Congressman Dana Rohrabacher was there in August. I went there in September and November. So it wasn't ramped up then, although they still, for some reason, they were just getting everybody, from what I understand. And there's a picture of my passport that's opened and a login sheet. And, it's like, I'm just a comic, man. I got nothing to offer. You know what I mean? But it's one thing to get me, but to get the friggin' lawyers and the journalists that are involved, I'm just like, the comic relief here. I mean, and that really happens in December. You think that was it? Once they got the information on this meeting and the plan that they had, that was it? Or they continued for a while? What happened after that?
Well, after that, the spying continued indefinitely. And, you know, for my purposes, you know, there wasn't much of a change. It just continued. We saw a lot of disinformation published in places like The Guardian, working with Vicencio, but there were these Ecuadorian journalists who were anti-Correa, anti-Assange, who were producing all of this disinformation in British media about how, working with Luke Harding, who is, you know, just one of the biggest frauds working in journalism. I don't know what he's done since his fake Assange meeting Manafort story, which has yet to be retracted by The Guardian. But they were basically saying all of this was conducted under the watch of Ecuadorian authorities.
Right.
It's totally false. And I think my story, working with court documents, working with witness testimony, shows that the Ecuadorian authorities, at least those who were around the embassy, were themselves being spied on. And this U.S. intelligence apparent trick was created within the surveillance system to feed separate video to the U.S. to allow the U.S., the quote-unquote American friends, to control the cameras. And Ecuador was just seeing, the Ecuadorian Senain security service was just seeing, you know, CCTV. So this should really be significant. I mean, what we're looking at here is gross misconduct that should invalidate any indictment of Julian Assange. These appear to be criminal activities carried out under the watch of a CIA director, Mike Pompeo, who bragged during his event at Texas A&M last year that we cheated, we lied, and we stole in the CIA. So this should invalidate Julian Assange's extradition to the U.S. And it also suggests that if he does come to the U.S., these same agencies and elements which spied on him and carried out a apparently criminal operation against him will seek to psychologically break and torture him if he's in their custody.
Well, there's no doubt about that. You don't even have to be tortured. You're just being in one of these, like MCC. I don't know if you saw this footage of MCC, people there that it's overcrowded and you can't move around, and you know, COVID is like breathing in the air. This whole operation, what they've gone through to try to get Julian Assange, how unusual is this? I mean, you would think that this guy was a mass murderer or something, or held the keys to some kind of bomb that could blow up the planet. What is the obsession with him?
Well, the obsession with Julian Assange is derived from his effectiveness as a publisher. He was shedding light on the inner workings of U.S. empire. And, you know, and there was something accurate, I think, about, to some degree, in Mike Pompeo's paranoid speech identifying WikiLeaks as a hostile foreign intelligence agency, in that Mike Pompeo compared Julian Assange to Philip Agee, who was a CIA whistleblower who released classified material to, you know, Counter Spy magazine and other leftist publishers that showed criminal activity around the globe, including assassination plots, coup plots, torture by the CIA. Pompeo claimed that Agee got former CIA field officer Richard Helms killed, I think in Greece. Julian Assange has no responsibility for any American deaths. In fact, a Pentagon investigation found that he and Chelsea Manning had no role, the information they released killed no one. But it really revealed not just criminal activity, but very devious activity, undemocratic activity in Cablegate. Vault 7 showed that the CIA is capable of opening up smart TVs to spy on people, that it's capable of obfuscating its own presence by implanting code in hacking that leads people to believe that another hacking agency or hacking collective was responsible. I mean, all of these things the public needs to know. The government should not be doing in their name. And the US government wants to tamp down on information that was basically reported by the New York Times, Washington Post, The Guardian, and a who's who of mainstream organizations, thanks to WikiLeaks and this really innovative publishing platform that Julian created. They're also trying to make an example of him. And I think the lack of outcry that we're seeing from the press makes it easy and possible and almost inevitable that other journalists and publishers who even do less than Assange to embarrass the US empire will be targeted in a similar way, will be forcibly muzzled through illegal means, and are currently being spied on. I think the story hasn't been fully told of the gross misconduct, of the abuses, and the apparently criminal activity that's targeted Julian Assange through this this hydra, this malicious hydra of UC Global, Las Vegas Sands, and apparently the CIA. And so
I think it's more than apparent. I think it's obvious that the CIA is involved in this because someone, I can't imagine this like octogenarian guy in Las Vegas who only cares about Israel would care about Assange. I mean, he was it was a sop to, obviously, to Pompeo, who was totally obsessed. And the other thing I was going to ask you here is because you mentioned Vault 7, and obviously the CIA is not happy with that. What they've done, what kind of tools they've created, and how they got out of the genie's bottle and everything, and people can use it. But Cablegate, you've said before that there was a lot that came out of Cablegate that you yourself were able to use.
Yeah, I mean, I've relied heavily on Cablegate just to show how the U.S. through these regime change cutouts, like the National Endowment for Democracy, USAID, how they're basically paying foreign opposition parties to push regime change operations, how they're meddling in elections in countries that are targeted for regime change, like Nicaragua or Venezuela. It helped provide the backdrop to the Hong Kong protests, where you had all of these NGOs and figures who were being backed up and even trained by the U.S. government or U.S. government related entities, staged these like months-long violent riots aimed at recolonizing Hong Kong. But I mean, people can debate me on that. They can say they were right to do that. I don't like China, whatever. But facts are facts, and the fact was that in these State Department cables, you could see which foreign opposition movements were being backed by the U.S. And it's coming at a time when the U.S. is in a state of complete hysteria over alleged Russian meddling because Russia's FSB or GRU supposedly hacked the emails of John Podesta and the DNC. Even if they had, I don't think that they flipped the election, but we're in a state of hysteria. If that's Russia's retaliation to what was exposed in Cablegate, which the U.S. was doing to it and on its periphery, then it's basically an elegant response. And I think that's the source of the resentment to Julian Assange, who basically just made it possible to publish those emails and those cables and was willing to do so. I mean, he just had the chutzpah to do so.
Also, those cables, I believe, show just massive financial crimes by various governments. And also Honduras, I believe. There's you got some information about the Honduran coup and stuff on Syria and in Libya, if I'm not
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in Syria, you could clearly see who among the opposition were U.S. informants. Most of the cables came before the proxy war began in Syria, but there's so much that still hasn't been released. But this is what Julian Assange is being prosecuted for. He's facing 17 charges under the Espionage Act and one more, and the charges carry a maximum penalty of 175 years in prison. He's not a U.S. citizen. He's an Australian citizen. Australia, acting as the stooge of the U.S., has done nothing to speak up for him. He's being tortured, according to UN Special Rapporteur on Torture, Niels Melzer. He's being held in a prison right now where he is stacked up with people who are being infected with coronavirus. And he faces extradition to a country, the U.S., which is certain to torture him, at the very least by putting him in a maximum security prison, denying him contact with his lawyers or with anyone, basically holding him in solitary. That is torture. And we should add, Randy, because you were a witness to this, in the court where Julian's first hearing, his first extradition hearing was held next to Belmarsh prison. There were U.S. officials in the court advising British prosecutors.
Yeah.
What I've learned is that a high-profile barrister, female barrister, representing Las Vegas Sands, attempted to gain entry to the court, asked the judge if she could observe the proceedings. She was rejected, but this really shows serious interest on the part of Sheldon Adelson.
Wow, that's a bombshell there in and of itself. I was there for 3 of the 4 days, and it was really disgraceful, disgusting, and deplorable and depressing to watch those proceedings, take place. And he being in this glass box, I'd like to see, the world should see that glass box that he was in. I think it's in everyone's interest to see that glass box that he was in the back of the room with the plexiglass. Hopefully somebody out there has clear photos and puts them out there. They should give them to you or somebody. It's a cry. If anybody's got anything, get them out there. Let the people see. He was treated like Eichmann. I've seen the Israeli trial of Eichmann in '61. He's in a similar kind of situation where he's surrounded by this bulletproof plexiglass combo cage in the back, but he actually has headphones on. He can hear the judge, and he can communicate with his attorneys. Assange is not even accorded that.
Yeah. Eichmann, who made sure the trains ran on time, could talk to his attorneys. But you were there, and you say that Julian was unable to. I just know if you're in a courtroom and you can't talk to your attorneys in real time, you're at a serious disadvantage. Beyond that, that kind of arrangement, what you described, and given the amount of surveillance that Julian's been under, it appears to be a further violation of attorney-client privilege. They could surveil or easily listen in on those conversations.
Whatever is happening to him right now, it's going to take years for this to resolve itself. If he survives this corona outbreak at Belmarsh, if he survives that and survives the psychological and physical torture on top of that, this could go on for years. And he's neutralized, and the example's being set, and this has to deter other people from doing it. And at least, let me ask you this, are people afraid to give documents now because of the treatment, like whistleblowers? I mean, not like the guy in the whistleblower, with that phone call with Trump, not that guy, that type. I'm talking about whistleblowers that got real heavy stuff on the national security state. Are they now deterred because of the treatment? Even if he wins in 3 or 4 years, he'll still be stuck in this horrible situation.
Well, without giving any details, in my experience, yes.
Yes. All right. That's it. 1 syllable answer. All right, so it's working. All right, Max, is there anything else you can tell us about UC Global here that we didn't see in today's article at the Grayzone? The Grayzone used to be called the Grayzone Project. Grayzone News at Twitter, right? Is it Grayzone News?
Twitter, it's on Twitter at the Grayzone News, and it's online at thegrayzone.com.
Yeah, it's a great
Gray with an A.
Yeah.
We're no longer the Grayzone Project because it's just a real fact.
Yeah.
We're a fact on the ground.
Are you going to write more on this, or is today's piece basically you uncovered a lot there? I don't know what else you're going to follow up on it.
Pretty much covered the broad outlines of the piece. There actually is there is a lot more to it, and there's more that I have to report. So I would definitely stay tuned for some follow-ups. I think that the follow-ups will be almost as shocking as this story, which really, besides introducing readers to the middlemen who apparently liaised between U.S. intelligence, Adelson's financial and political empire, and this UC Global contractor, really put all of the pieces of this abusive and probably illegal surveillance operation together. But there are going to be more elements to it, possibly related to David Morales playing in the first division. So that's all I'll say.
All right. Well, good. I'll stay right here, locked down in the fourth division, sweepy league. All right. So you're in the first division of journalism. You're a real journalist, and thank you for all that you do, Max Blumenthal. And we'll see you soon. And we're going to go and talk right now. We'll be right back with the great Italian investigative journalist, Stefania Maurizi.
Thanks a lot, Randy.
Thank you, Max.
Alla mattina, appena alzata, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, 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 alla mattina, appena alzata, in risaia mi tocca andare. Fra gli insetti e le zanzare, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, 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 e fra gli insetti e le zanzare un duro lavoro mi tocca fare. Mamma mia, oh che tormento, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, 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 oh, mamma mia, oh che tormento.
Okay, nice music. Hi, I'm Randy Credico, back. This is Randy Credico live on the fly, Assange Countdown to Freedom. And we are now being joined by the investigative journalist that Max was talking about in the previous segment. And that is the well-respected, esteemed investigative journalist now at In Facto, out of Italy. And she is to me, you're a dear friend of mine, Stefania Maurizi. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Randy. Thanks.
The last time I saw you was at the trial. And before we talk about UC Global, just give me a minute about your impression, just an overview of that farce that we witnessed for 4 days.
Well, first of all, it was really hard to follow the case, because even if I was inside the courtroom, which in theory would be the best place to stay and to be allowed to follow the case, I could barely hear something like 60% of the hearing, because the judge was speaking very lowly and no one there to ask her to speak louder, and the lawyers were speaking lower, and so I miss a lot of a big part of the hearing, and even other colleagues miss it. And it was very, for me, it was very hard to see Julian after maybe the last time I met him was in November 2018. And then I saw him again at the hearing, and I was shocked to look at him and to look how he was treated behind that glass wall as a very dangerous criminal. It was really shocking for me. It was really shocking to realize how he is being treated and how his health is collapsing further,
Yeah, it was obvious to you, and it must have been difficult. I've only known him for about 3.5 years, and you've known him for a long time, along with partnering with Snowden and Glenn Greenwald on their release. You have partnered with WikiLeaks for the past 10 years. And so in that time between then and now, I know you have become very good friends with him. So it must have been painful to see him being treated like Eichmann was in Israel when he was on trial in a glass encampment. And at least Eichmann had access to his lawyers, where Julian doesn't have access to his lawyers.
Well, first of all, I would like to clarify that my sadness goes further than being a friend of Julian. The problem is that this sadness is due to the fact that as a journalist, I published the very same documents and information he published. And I have done this for the last 11 years, because the first time I published something in partnership with WikiLeaks was in August 2009, which means 11 years ago.
Wow.
So, and since then, I never stopped publishing documents, partnering with WikiLeaks, and I have published the very same information. And as a journalist, I have never had any problem. So for me, it's sad as a journalist before than being sad as a human being, which is of course true. But as a journalist, really sad, because I cannot tolerate this double standard. I'm completely safe. I have never had any trouble, any problem. No one put me in prison. No one ever questioned me. No one, I never lost my freedom, whereas he has never known freedom again. How can I accept this,
You published everything that he, including Vault 7, you put the material out there. And that's, I think, one of the main reasons why they are after him, is that they're so angry, or they don't want any more of that Vault 7 stuff to get out. But you published everything, and you're right, they never went after you.
Never ever, never ever. And we have always partnered. Of course, there are minor releases which were done without media partners, but very few of them. But I work on all of them, and I can tell you that behind releases, there is a lot of hard journalistic work. Right. So, I mean, whenever I look at how he has been treated, and whenever I look at the fact that the WikiLeaks staff has been under investigation since 2010 by the grand jury in Alexandria, Virginia, I'm very upset, because it's an obvious abuse. I mean, we traditional journalists never experienced any trouble, and they did a lot of trouble. So they are just after them,
Yeah, a very good point on that. They don't go after the New York Times, the Guardian, which released the names. The Guardian back in 2011, they released the names of individuals. So they obviously they took you very seriously, the CIA, to the point where you were one of the key focuses of this UC Global operation that Max just laid out, this massive UC Global operation. And it all begins, I believe, in December of 2017. Can you walk us through that day in December 2017 with the backpack and all?
Basically, I have no evidence that it was the CIA. I know that there are protected witnesses who basically testified that these materials were shared with the US intelligence. And of course, I was targeted, and I didn't realize I was targeted to that extent because we never traveled to London. I was I was put into the condition of traveling with my phones, with my computers. Sometimes I was able to travel without any computer, any electronic devices, but phones were still really important. As you know, we journalists have to travel with phones. We have to be able to stay in touch with our editors, with our sources, and so on. So I went to the embassy at the end of 2017. It was 29th of December and 30th of December 2017. And I realized something was really unusual because as soon as I arrived, they seized my backpack, which never happened before, because I have always been able to access the embassy and to meet Julian together with bringing my backpack. And of course, the security guards for UC Global I've always done security checks, but they never seized my backpack before. So when they seized my backpack, I protested. They said, look, I have sensitive materials, I have my notes, I have whatever. They said, you are not allowed to bring your backpack. So at that point, I realized something really unusual, and I was not even able to bring a pen to meet Julian and to take notes. I was not even allowed to bring my block notes, whatever. And as soon as I get back from the embassy, I contacted my editors at La Repubblica, and they said, look, it's really weird because my backpack was seized. It never happened before. I really don't know what is going on. And of course, I protested, and of course, I disagree with my backpack being seized. And of course, the security guards told me that they would never ever touch my stuff and so on. And so I realized that it was completely unusual, highly unusual. And now, in last year, I discovered that I basically opened my backpack, got access to my devices, to my USB sticks, where I had very important information. Fortunately, it was encrypted. So fortunately, I have protected my sources from this point of view. But you never know. You never know whether they have been able to basically to copy the file and to decrypt it, because you don't know how, when you have the entire force of the state against you, you never know whether they have some way to access your encrypted documents and stuff. So I'm really furious about this because, you know, I'm a journalist. So I mean, my documents are journalistic materials. They are not supposed to access these materials. They are not supposed, this is the kind of thing you expect in a regime. In a regime, you expect these kind of things, but you don't expect these kind of things in a democracy, you know?
Right. So now that day when you left, you spoke to your editors, you weren't sure what they took, what they copied, and but you suspected something happened, but you always knew that you were being watched every time you were visiting him. You know, I remember you were there in November when I was there covering your FOIA hearing. And we talked about it. And, I was told to, when I got into the room at the Z, as soon as I got there and I got into the room, I come back downstairs and they say, you tell them, change the room. I don't like the view, or it reminds me of something too sad. But I mean, you suspected all along prior that you might have been followed or under surveillance, or certainly a person of interest. And is that what you thought afterwards for sure, or did you already suspect this was happening?
Look, I had many weird experience. For example, back in 2013, when I was working on the Snowden files, I have experienced tailing, aggressive tailing for, I suppose, for intimidation purpose. And I immediately informed my editors, and of course, there is no way what should have done. You cannot file a criminal complaint because you have been tailed. But then in 2015, something new, strange things happened. For example, I was targeted physically. I was stolen a backpack with important information. And that was 4 months before we published the NSA intercept of Berlusconi, our prime minister. And basically that kind of materials, the Berlusconi intercept by the NSA, we revealed that those interception thanks to WikiLeaks. And 4 months before, I was targeted in Rome while traveling from the airport to the center of the city, and I was targeted, and I immediately filed a criminal complaint at the police in Rome. And so I hope the police would investigate this, but never heard again. I never heard again. And that was 4 months before we exposed the NSA interception of our former Prime Minister Berlusconi. Then I experienced disruption in my communications. For example, my editors were calling me or sending emails, and I didn't get anything. And they were, finally, they were calling me and they were asking me, why you are not replying? And I would say, look, I never received anything. I have no calls on my phone. I have no emails. I have no text messages. So that's why I'm not replying you. And I ask experts why I experienced such disruption in my communications. And no one was able to provide a sensible explanation. They would say, we don't know, I don't know. I was sending emails to people, and these emails never reached the intended recipients. Like, for example, I sent 4 emails to Bill Binney, and he got nothing. And, other friends were sending emails to me, and the emails got lost. So I experienced this disruption. So I was wondering why I was experiencing this disruption. To these days, I have no idea why. But at the end of the day, in 2019, I discovered this UC global targeting. And so I wonder whether this targeting has anything to do with this disruption,
Yeah, well, it obviously you've partnered with people that are despised and being hunted down by U.S. intelligence agencies, and no one has worked any more closely than you have. So it's like, really an obvious deduction that they would be very interested in you. So in 2019, this stuff on UC Global comes out, and how did you discover it, and what was your reaction?
Well, I was upset because I had very important documentation in my encrypted files. So I'm still upset because probably I'm sure they tried to copy. I'm not sure whether they have been able to decrypt these files, but that's very important information. I mean, we journalists always travel with important information because people talk to us, people provide documents to us. And of course, we have to travel with this material because what can we do? We cannot go around the city and have people we don't know whether they can help us with keeping our files safe or keeping our phones safe. So, I mean, it was upsetting for me. I'm still upset. I still want to discover whether they have been able to access my documents. And, you know, for me, it's really important because you have to realize there is a reason why I started working with WikiLeaks for my newspaper back in 2009. I did so because one of my sources was in trouble and she had stopped talking to me. And at that point, I realized I needed better source protection. And since I am a mathematician, so I have a degree in mathematics, for me it was natural to look at cryptography as a way to protect my sources. And it was one of my sources inside the world of cryptography, who basically told me, you should have a look on their work. You should have a look on what they are doing. And that was back in 2009 when no one had, very, very few people had even heard of WikiLeaks. So I started this kind of work because I had concern with about my sources. And I wanted to use cryptography to protect my sources. And now, 11 years after, I discovered that my files are probably in the hands of the CIA. And I want to discover whether they have been able to open, to decrypt it and access the information. Because for me, it is a stress test, you know? I want to discover whether I finally, after 11 years of this journey, I have been able to protect my sources.
Well, you know, I on the day that you found out, and then they started, when did you see, you know, some of the material that was provided in the Spanish courtroom, including the video of you, and what was your response when you saw the video surveillance of you, which we are showing right now?
Well, in a sense, the video was expected because cameras were everywhere. So we expected that kind of filming. Well, we didn't expect the cameras being equipped with audio, being able to basically get our conversations. And we didn't expect our phones being unscrewed, of course. And you know, you have to realize that they took pictures of my chargers, of every devices I had, of my USB sticks, of my chargers, of my power bank, whatever. And I wonder why they took pictures, you know?
Well, so they got these pictures, the video that we're looking at, and it must have been when you saw that, and you heard the audio or whatever, it must have been a little chilling for you. I mean,
yeah,
feeling like an invasion of your, you're being violated, right?
Absolutely, a deep sense of violation, you know, because as I said, these kind of things are usually done by regimes. So you expect these kind of things if you travel to China, if you travel to the usual regime, but you don't expect this kind of targeting inside an embassy where you basically, you know that Ecuador had granted Julian Assange asylum, so he was supposed to protect him. You didn't expect such heavy targeting, you know?
Yeah. So I suppose when you saw that, your reaction was, I mean, how were you going to address it, and how did you address it? Did you talk to the Spanish lawyers who are working for Assange? Did you get the material? Did you write an article about it? I mean, what did you do? Did you go to court, file an amicus brief or anything?
Look, I absolutely want to make these people accountable. I absolutely want to make the UC Global people accountable, the Ecuadorian authorities accountable, because I wonder whether they authorize them to do this kind of operation, because I wonder how UC Global acted. I'm very skeptical they took this initiative, and they didn't inform the Ecuadorian authorities. I want to make the US authorities accountable, because if it is true, as the protected witnesses say, that this information and this data were shared with the US intelligence, I absolutely want to make them accountable. I'm completely upset that they got access to my materials. They knew I was a journalist. I was visiting him as a journalist. I was not visiting him as a friend, as his mother, as his father, or whatever. I was visiting, and even when visiting, we were discussing journalistic matters. We were not discussing our personal lives or our private matters, you know. So it's completely unacceptable that they basically do these kind of things to journalists. You expect these kind of things, these kind of targetings by very repressive regimes, you know?
Yeah, well, it's something you would expect in Turkey or Saudi Arabia,
exactly.
You know, countries of that nature. Now, so you have this. Are you also Sheldon Adelson? You know, who was financing? He was the in between Pompeo and doing the bidding of Pompeo. He's paying for it. What was your response to that? That a U.S. citizen was underwriting David Morales's work?
I mean, it's the whole story is completely unbelievable. It's completely, it's so dirty. It's we have seen all sorts of targeting of WikiLeaks by, you know, all sorts of intelligence, private intelligence, like, for example, when in 2011 we had that anti-WikiLeaks plan by Palantir, the company which has basically spent years cooperating with the CIA in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and is a very controversial company, very secretive company. So we expected all sorts of tricks, but we didn't expect such, you know, Orwellian, such, I mean, such dirty targeting, you know?
Yeah, I guess I'm naive. I mean, because I remember I was there. We had coffee several times, and I spoke to you. I went to that great case that was put on by Miss DeHaan and Estelle DeHaan and Jennifer Robinson and the other lawyer. It was, and you went there, and you know, that was a great moment in the history of this entire saga that you participated in, and I think you self-financed it. And I know you have a pending resolution of your FOIA request, and I suppose that's when we'll get you back on to talk about that. I don't want to burn you out on all of this now. I want to kind of keep it to this UC Global. Any last words about UC Global and what kind of threat it poses, not just them, but their puppeteers, what it poses to free speech and free association?
Look, they have to pay a price. We have to make them accountable, because we cannot tolerate that journalists are targeted this way as in regimes. We absolutely cannot tolerate this. So we absolutely have to bring them to the court and to go to prison to pay for their criminal acts. And we absolutely have to do this, because otherwise, if they can do these kind of things and nothing happen, this provide you a measure, this provide you, yes, this provide you a measure of what can happen with journalists trying to investigate the highest level of powers, because they are targeting WikiLeaks precisely because they basically WikiLeaks targets the highest level of powers, the CIA, the Pentagon, the NSA, and that's why they are targeting WikiLeaks. So I absolutely want to fight this case. I absolutely want to bring them to the court, because they cannot go out with this. Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, I know you are a determined, resolute, and tireless truth teller, and someone that seeks justice, and you're not going to be deterred pursuing the criminals that are behind this matter. I know you, and you do not let up. And anyone that thinks that you will, they're on a fool's errand. And I just want to say, I appreciate all the work that you have done over the years. And it really is an honor to know you. And I just want once again to express my gratitude for all the sacrifices you have made. I know you'll say you're just doing your job, but you make a lot of sacrifices, because I know you're such a great writer, you could do it in a commercial venue if you wanted to and made a lot of money and do some jet setting. But you're one of the few that turns that down and goes on the honor route. And it's just too bad that more people don't follow your lead.
I think there are many journalists who try to do the good work and the right work, and it's more and more difficult because you have this media landscape which is a complete disaster, because basically you have this media landscape when billionaires own this media and they have huge interests, financial interests, and of course they will never have a support revealing secret files about the NSA or the CIA or the Pentagon, because it doesn't gain you any powerful friend at the end of the day. And it really gains you very dangerous and powerful enemies. That's why you don't see a lot of this kind of reporting. If you look at what basically, there is a magnificent article by James Risen, who is the Pulitzer Prize, now working for The Intercept. And he basically tells the story of how it worked at the New York Times when they had massive scoops about the CIA, the NSA, or the Pentagon. And what you can read in his article is basically a long history of compromise, where the New York Times editors basically compromised with the CIA, with the US authorities, and they basically accepted not to publish very compromising information, or publishing after a year or maybe after the election. So, it's imagine what it means to have WikiLeaks not compromising at all. Imagine what it means, in such a landscape, to have a new aggressive media organization.
Yes, well, Stefania, there are other journalists, and they're in this book here, and friends of his here called In Defense of Julian Assange, and you're in there with a beautiful column or article, and you can get this, and I recommend people, these are some of the few out there that have been there for a long time for Julian Assange. I appreciate you being part of this special program on UC Global today. And we will talk to you very soon once you find, like I said, a resolution to the FOIA problem that you've been fighting for, I guess, 6 or 7 years. Thank you very much. From In Facto,
thank you, Randy. Thanks.
Investigative journalist Stefania Maurizi. Thank you, Stefania.
Thank you, Randy. Thanks so much.
We'll be right back, folks. in just a minute for some closing remarks.
O Badoglio, Pietro Badoglio, ingrassato dal fascio littorio, col tuo degno compare Vittorio, ci hai già rotto abbastanza i coglion. Tlas mai dit farei, tlas mai fight farei, tlas mai dit, tlas mai fight, tlas mai dit farei, tlas mai di russissi, tlas mai falu, nonno, tutto questo salvarti non può. Ti ricordi quando eri fascista e facevi il saluto romano, o dal duce stringevi la mano? Sei davvero un gran bel porcaccion. Ti ricordi l'impresa d'Etiopia e il ducato di Addis Abeba? Meritavi di prender la meba ed invece facevi milioni. Ti ricordi la guerra di Francia che l'Italia copriva d'infamia, ma tu intanto prendevi la mancia e col duce facevi ispezion. Ti ricordi la guerra di Grecia e i soldati mandati al macello, ed allora per farti più bello rassegnavi le tue dimissioni.
Okay, Stefania Maurizi, what a really special individual. And I want to thank Kurt. I want to thank Max Blumenthal for appearing today and sharing his thoughts on his bombshell, spectacular new article in the Grayzone on UC Global. You can get it, go to thegrayzone.com. I'm Randy Credico. Once again, this is Randy Credico live on the fly. If you'd like to help us continue this programming, which has now been, we've doubled. We do, instead of one a week, we're doing at least 2 a week. And you can go to AssangeCountdownToFreedom.com and make a small donation just so we can pay our bills and continue doing this until the continuation of the hearing on extradition in September. I want to thank Kelly Lane, the engineer out of North Carolina. I want to thank Jimmy Sunderland, the editor out of Lake Arrowhead, California. I want to thank Margaret Ratner Kunstler for putting the program notes together. And I want to thank her in description. And I want to thank her daughter, Sarah Kunstler, the lawyer, who also is our webmaster. And she puts all of the stuff, and it's like a lot of work too. And so I thank all of those people for helping us out. See, I'm surrounded by 4 wonderful women here, but we're missing a lot of Scandinavia. Please contact us. All right, we're going to go out now, folks. I have no idea what it is, but we're going out with it. See you very soon, in a couple of days.
Forse ad ascoltarmi state, canto il delitto di quei galeotti che con gran rabbia vollero trucidare il deputato Giacomo Matteotti. Erano tanti, Viola, Rossi e Tumì, il capo della banda, Benito Mussolini. Dopo che Matteotti avean trovato, mentre che stava andando al Parlamento, venne su di una macchina caricato da quegli ignobili della banda nera. In mezzo a un bosco fu trasportato là e quei vili aguzzini gli disser con furor: perché tu il fascismo hai sempre odiato, ora dovrai morir qui sull'istante. E dopo averlo a torto bastonato, di pugnalate gliene dieder tante, così per mano di quei vili traditori moriva Matteotti, capo dei lavoratori.